Hello, and welcome to this episode of Skift Meetings podcast, the podcast for curious event professionals. My name is Andrea Doyle, and I am the senior editor of Skift Meetings. In this episode titled Giving a Voice to the Meeting Industry's LGBT Community, I have the pleasure of speaking with David Jefferys, CEO and Executive Director of the LGBT Meeting Professionals Association. He's the founder of this association, the only one dedicated to connecting, educating, and advancing LGBT professionals in the meetings industry. We talked about the motivation for creating this association that he founded 6 years ago. We talked about how the meeting industry is evolving as far as the LGBT community is concerned. We talk about how there are blue islands and seas of red and ways the meetings industry gets diversity right. I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation, and I invite you to check out other episodes of Skift Meetings podcast with tips and insights from today's most influential event professionals. You can find all the episodes on our website or subscribe through your favorite podcast service.
Hello, my name is David Jefferys. I am the founder and executive director of the LGBT Meeting Professionals Association. We're now 6 years old. We are the first and only community-based association for the LGBT community within the meetings industry in the world.
And as the founder, can you tell us a little bit about why you felt there was a need for such an organization?
Yeah, so doing some research for a retail client, a tourism client of mine, because my background was hospitality marketing, and that brought me to the development of a company called The Navigator, which was a guidebook company for the LGBT tourist. That involved advertising and also content, on things that might be more relevant or more attractive, maybe even historical about the destinations. I had 11 different cities. One of them was Atlantic City. And out of that grew a number of consulting opportunities for folks that said, look, it seems like you have a handle on the LGBT community, tourism. How can we make our property more receptive, more friendly, more welcoming to the LGBT community? So I had what I guess I would call a gig, 3-year gig with the Borgata Hotel, Casino, Resort, Spa in Atlantic City. And they had recently refurbished some of their meeting space. And while we were building their microsite, called Out at Borgata, and we were building content that was relevant to the LGBT community in their smaller theater, the music box. My direct report, Joe Lupo, who was at that point senior vice president of Borgata, said, Dave, these meeting rooms, isn't there some way that you could fill them with either LGBT meetings or groups, or even just open up the door and make it welcome to LGBT planners, and see if we can do the same thing for the retail side that we're doing on the meeting side. And he said, and that would help me, with the overall project. And I said, Joe, of course, it sounds like an easy request. Let me go back to my office and I'll pick up the phone and I'll call a lot of the destinations that I was working with through the Navigator series, because I had these 11 cities, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, New Orleans, surely Philadelphia. Surely there'd be contacts that were part of the community that would tell me all about the meeting side of this, that there had to be a group. After all, IGLTA exists for the tourism and retail side of it. So there must have been some type of organization. And I was told repeatedly that nothing like that existed, that the current state of the LGBT community within the construct of these conferences, such as a PCMA conference or a site conference or an MPI, a WEC coming up in Mexico, or Connect meetings, ASAE, any one of those, NACE, even, the catering executives. They just kind of casually got together and met at a bar, and that was the end of that. There was no database, there was no list, there was no communications, there was no attempt to organize. There was nothing that would help bring that part of the meetings industry together on a regular basis, where you could meet, you could expand and grow your contacts, your networking, or you could just belong. Because there were so many people that were not part of that little smaller group that met on a regular basis, that had become friendly, that went to some of these meetings on a regular basis. In particular, I'm going to cite that most of the women were not organized that are part of our group, and that continues to grow. That is definitely an aspect that I'm proud of. Just the other day, I was in Philadelphia for GMITE and Greater Meetings Industry Day, right? Global Meetings Industry Day. And sitting right next to me, I handed my card to a young lady, and she looked at my name and the card and LGBT MPA on it, and she said, "I didn't know there was an association for the community." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Are you a planner?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, "I plan about 5 meetings a year." And I said, "Well, we're 6 years old." I said, "And it's absolutely free to all community members to join." Before the conference was over, she held up her phone and she said, "I'm a member." So, you continue to have stories like that, that, give you some sense of need and then also some sense of satisfaction that back 6 years ago, when the observation that I made, and I Googled the heck out of this just to be sure that there wasn't anything 15 layers deep, that we had so many associations, organizations. We had chambers of commerces that were organized in cities. We had marital rights, we had adoption rights. We were raising families on a regular basis. We were winning rights in countries who never thought that, freedom for the LGBT community would ever be won. And yet they're in the meetings industry, a very powerful part of tourism and travel, had nothing. Mm-hmm. And so here we are today.
So that was 6 years ago.
6 years, December. Yep. So we are just now going into our 7th year.
Have you seen things improve for the community since then?
I have seen things improve for the community. And a couple of great examples of that is that the content, attending an IMEX event about 6 years ago, was a session on diversity. No specific details about what angle or, what learning outcome might be about diversity, but just, creating a more diverse event. So I went with my then chair, Derek Johnson, and we attended the course. And it was the moderators were 2 Caucasian women from Vancouver who talked about food and the diversity of food and how its impact was important in the meetings industry. And when we walked out the door, I said, "Wow, is there ever a need for more education?" I said, "And certainly something from our point of view or our voice." I said, because here you are looking at diversity, and it couldn't have been less diverse, in terms of its presentation and in terms of its content. So we didn't quite get what we went for, but we ended up with far more in the end, in that we had a better understanding. We just now did at Convening Leaders and Power of Purpose, and we're going to be doing at EduCon, a course that involves transplanters, because I know there's a question somewhere in your mind about the trans community, and it is a growing community. And as it grows, it grows into all aspects of life and career and professions. And so, yes, there really are trans planners, and they really do have different issues. And those issues are of interest to folks that, want to be educated on concerns or realities that when they plan something, it might be a consideration in the back of their mind that some of their attendees fit into the category. And maybe they're not planners, they're suppliers, but, nevertheless, that's an aspect of the community that's growing. So, I couldn't be more excited about giving a platform to that part of the community, as I think, gay men have been represented for a long time. So increasing, the number of women that join that, are lesbian and even, 23% of our membership, identifies as bisexual. So, there's that aspect of the community that, often gets overlooked and by themselves, by their own admission. They're like, well, we're bi, and so we don't fit anywhere, and it's like, well, you fit here, because we're totally diverse and open and inclusive. So.
And so you use the word inclusive. How important is diversity and inclusion when it comes to meetings and conferences?
Yeah, so I really think that that's paramount moving forward as we develop as humans, right? And as countries move forward with rights and freedoms and things like that. And, the questions of destinations, and there's always a backwards, right? I mean, we did a Just Say Gay canvas bag at a Connect event about a year ago, just for all of our Florida destinations. We call them Blue Islands in Seas of Red, and they're out there, and they're welcoming and they're accepting, and they have a voice as well, and they don't always get the recognition, and sometimes there's pressure, to make decisions. So against them, so I think that the increased knowledge of diversity and inclusion, impacts on all of us in that, we're greater good of acceptance, not just within the LGBT community, because there's obviously this Pan-Asian community that, feels like they struggle a lot. There's the Black and Brown folks, I'm really good friends with Jason Dunn and the National Coalition of Black Meeting Planners. And he and I feel like we have similar missions. We just have different audiences. So I think it covers all of that. We're just a part of inclusion.
What do you feel the industry gets right as far as this is concerned, and what doesn't it get so right?
I did a tiny little bit of thinking. I'll admit to the audience that the question was coming my way, I think there are three things that really stand out along my journey. First off, I think what the industry gets right is that they continue to put a spotlight on it, and there's an increase in attention, and the more attention you bring to a situation, the more likely you are to address it. It's sometimes in the right way and sometimes in the wrong way. I was watching the news this morning, and I was reminded the fact that Florida wants to ban all materials between 3 and 5 years of age. It talks about trans or talks about anything that might be LGBT. So, and, ironically, when I talk to people about when they maybe first thought that they wanted to change their gender, or they may have thought about when they might have been attracted to the same sex as them, it really does start right around 3 to 5. I mean, humans begin to become aware of, not all, but many of them begin, but certainly by 7 to 11, you have, whether you've fully come to understand it, depending on your environment and the role models that you've been exposed to, which are increasing all the time. Certainly by the time I was 7, I thought, I don't think I'm going to like girls. I don't know why, but I just, I was attracted and, and then confused because, back in 1962, there really wasn't anything out there that said that, hey, if you feel this way, you're probably okay. Like Sesame Street, didn't exist. So, but I think then, the second thing is there's a deepening of the intention, within the industry, address DEI, and I think because of that intention, we're seeing, as with our course on transplanting, we're seeing education, and that reaches out, and I think through education, we solve an awful lot of misunderstandings, misconceptions, and prejudices, because they're usually founded on lack of knowledge. And I think that's pretty much a universal agreement. So, on the wrong side is probably not enough, and the retaliation, like we see in, to change laws, because there's just a certain number of people that believe that exposing it to youth and things like that are not in the best interest. And everybody's entitled to an opinion, and we have ours.
Right. I mean, study after study proves that DEI benefits all. Why do you feel more organizations don't realize this?
There's an interesting stat out there that was done by, the Society for Human Resource. I was in a recent roundtable with Jason Dunn, Black Coalition Meeting Planners, and he said, what's going on with DEI since George Floyd, and because that was a pivotal moment, and there are facts out there, and the number of positions for DEI officers or even at the C level, in hospitality and regular corporations and manufacturing all across the board increased by 55%. Now in 2023, CBS, NBC, I think one of the major broadcast TV stations released a story that said that the retention of those hired specifically for those roles have fallen off by 33%. So obviously the beginning of our intentions were good and strong. And I think the recognition of its importance became a part of that. Sustaining it, I think, is really the more serious question. How do we go about continuing to meet that commitment? And obviously some of its cost, some of its structure. I like to tell the story of one of our board members that entered the board as Ron Rowley, who was a pre-Olympic bicycler and worked with the Nike Corporation. And he was with us we didn't have term limits at the time. So he was with us for a full 2 years and went right into lockdown with us. And when he came out of lockdown, he was Rene Rowley, and he had transitioned. So, and he was 2 degrees from the top of Nike, embraced, and Nike started a series of educational courses that you were permitted to take time off from your job without penalty, and you could attend. It was anything from learning how to cook Indian food to Sri Lankan food to the politics of, Russia and Uganda, which is just recently, increased by the death penalty, homosexuality, so their approach was educate, and make it available on as easy a basis as possible. And I'm sorry to have lost Ron, but Ron spoke in a number of these types of settings and podcasts about what Nike had done as a global corporation, because obviously they want to sell shoes to everybody in their, they're located globally. But at the same time, his specific indication was that the top was committed to being as diverse and inclusive as possible.
And that's really important to have a top down support versus bottom up.
Absolutely. If it doesn't flow from the top down, it loses its agenda. Yeah, there's no question about it.
So then Nike is this huge company that gets it right. What do you think about this latest controversy with Budweiser?
Well, I've seen a lot of YouTube recently, people blowing up cans of, Bud Light and Budweiser. And, I think one would want it to settle down. I think that there's been some elevated attention to the trans community in some negative ways. But I think if you look through the history of growth and acceptance of uniqueness, I know that there's a commercial running right now on acceptance of the Jewish community. It's 2.5% of the American population, but it's subject to about 55% of anti-racism attacks. So we now see commercials, and there's the commercial about Jesus knows all this too. He forgave everybody that sinned against him. So there's a couple of campaigns that are out, specifically to try to improve acceptance and decrease prejudice.
So like the whole Budweiser controversy is around the transgender person who's on the can of Budweiser. And it got me to researching about acceptance in that community. And I found that an average of 60% of transgender and gender non-conforming employees report experiencing aggressive behaviors, like invasive gender questions, being actively excluded by coworkers and misidentified. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, not being trans and not being, able to speak directly from that voice. So then, there would be interpolation. I can say that, being a cis gay white man, doesn't put me at the best advantage to understanding the journey of transitioning. However, in my role as executive director, I have heard many, many, many stories. And I wouldn't want to make a claim without basis for it, but I would at least suggest that it's probably more than the average individual hears, just because of my role being part of the LGBT community and being the executive director of this particular association. So even if it's slotted to just down into the meeting side of it, you do get some spillover and people share their stories. I think the trans community has a lot of challenges. I think it's very unique in its nature because it's not about attraction to your own sex. It's about the desire to change your own sex. It's about transitioning. And I think like anything else, they're beginning to grow and become a larger part of the population, and they're rising up and becoming more visible. And I think that they'll go through all of the challenges, like the LGBT community, the gay side of it, went through Stonewall 52 years ago now, I guess. But I was in New York for that celebration, and most of the people that were arrested were lesbian anyway, which is an interesting fact. It was more about women being arrested than men being arrested. But I know that the male part of the LGBT community took it under their wings to use it and start what we now know as pride parades. That was the birth of the pride parade, was Stonewall. So we've had pride parades for 50 years. So I think that the transgender community will evolve. Nothing is going to stop it. And I think that they'll go through very, dings and bumps that occur. I think they're going through one right now. Just as we're seeing some legislation in Florida about youth and exposure to information and so on, and that too, will evolve and will move forward. And, and I think that they'll pull themselves up, and it's they're very strong. I will say this: when you make a desire to change yourself physically from one sex to another, you are absolutely convicted as to who you want to be and where you want to go in the world. And with that level of energy that it requires to go through a transitioning process, and the number of phases associated with it is so complex, and there's so much psychological counseling and everything else that you have to do now in order to even get approvals for some of the medical procedures, that I believe that community will take its role and will move forward in a positive way.
Right. And there are so many bright spots. Like on my last podcast, I had Ren from Emerald, and Emerald is now including surgeries to transition in its benefits package.
Right. Well, if you want to be an HRC 100 company, you have to provide those same insurance benefits, not just to same-sex spouses, but you also have to provide it to your trans employees, right? And that covers surgeries as well.
And where can our listeners get more information about the HRC 100 companies?
It's hrc.org. It's
okay.
It's really very simple. Yeah.
Okay.
And then you go to their CEI. They evaluate cities, destinations, and they evaluate companies. Wow. So it's the 100 index, and they produce a catalog, and you can get it right online. And so you could look up any potential employer, any current employer, or any company, period. Just, and by the way, I believe I'm saying this correctly. Anheuser-Busch scores 100.
Wow.
And it's probably part of the reason why there's backlash.
I see. So another podcast featured Ken Halsinger from Freeman, and Freeman just released a bunch of data, and it's showing that the average conference attendee is getting younger. And I feel, as there are more young people in the industry, this helps with DEI because they're usually more open-minded and more evolved.
So are you, I just want to make sure I get clarity on where the source of that was. Didn't Harvard also do a report on that? Or are you saying Freeman?
Freeman's recent research showed the average age of an attendee went from 51 to 46.
Yes. Okay. Well, then we agree on that from whatever source that might be. And of course, also documented is that from Gallup. So let's just identify the source there, that the Gen Z population identifies as LGBT 19.7%, as opposed to millennials, which is 11.2%. So you have clearly more self-recognition of being part of the LGBT community, as we skew younger. So is that going to be beneficial for the meetings industry? Absolutely. As they grow into their roles and mature into positions of greater power and influence, obviously they're going to bring with them their value systems. And that value system, is more open and more embracing, more inclusive. So, yeah, I do. I think that's a real positive thing.
Right. And in that same report, it showed how many different pronouns there are now. And it, touched upon the importance of using the correct pronouns.
Right. And we've always been in favor of that. And, I have a quick answer on that. I think anytime you validate authentically, somebody who cares about how they identify, then you're being more supportive. And nothing beats being more supportive of the individual. On my own Zoom, on our Zoom, I'm he, I'm his, you'd be she, her, hers, Zoom, or maybe not. Maybe you've transitioned and I just don't know it yet. You haven't told me that part about you. But the use of pronouns, I think, has become more of a standard, in the industry. And it was adopted fairly quickly because why would there be resistance? You want to recognize.
And a lot of times the respecting that is highlighted in diversity training programs. How important do you find these type of programs?
So, and them, right? So when Ron Rowley was transitioning to Renee Rowley during a period of time, he became for them, and then became she or hers. And I go back to the fact that Ron/Renee, Renee/Ron, depending on what side of the transition you want, spoke about Nike in a way that its success in building a strong culture was really dedicated to the roots of the education and the variety of knowledge that you could pick up without penalty, on your time, just because you had interest in learning different language, learning about food, learning about they ran the gamut of them through their HR department. So you could sign up for almost any aspect of the difference in terms of human existence, or identification. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely essential. It's our way out. I think it's our way out is education.
And also by having all the proper pronouns, say on a registration form, it makes people feel included and welcome. Because
absolutely, sure, yeah, acceptance, yeah, number one. Mm-hmm.
Because if how they identify isn't represented on that form, I think then that automatically doesn't make you feel welcome.
Yes, and I'd like to say that we're those are issues like the HB2 rule, because we've had Charlotte speak on a couple of our panels, and the story goes that their state enacted the rule because they enacted the opposite rule. They went to gender neutral bathrooms again at Blue Island and Red Sea, and they said no sooner had we passed a rule, in our city government that we were not going to identify restrooms as male or female anymore. We were going to, just say, gender neutral or all gender. The state decided to take action against them, and they took the fall for it because they actually lost quite a bit of booked meetings business, which was, just a very unfortunate misunderstanding of the history of all of that. We've given them a platform to be able to talk about that more to our members, and some of that information is available on our site, lgbtmpa.com. So we have Dave Diversity, which is a link. You can click on that, and that's 12 hours of education. We'll talk about a lot of those things, try to clarify and give a better perspective on the origin of it, and and the politics of it. Yeah.
So, talking about Charlotte, do you agree with a meeting group that boycotts a city like that because of a law that's enacted that they don't agree with?
So our policy is we are anti bans and boycotts. Last year at IMEX, we did a panel on bans and boycotts. We are refreshing some parts of that for EdgeCon. So one of the questions that is going to be on there will go back to bans and boycotts. As I said, I think our new strategy is, islands of blue and seas of red, which is, of course, a lot of what, impacts on that. But Visit Dallas is a great supporter of ours. They have a DEI officer, Cheryl, that amazing job of righting wrong impressions, and again through education, that Dallas is very welcoming and has a very strong LGBT community, and they do an awful lot to support all of that, and not just LGBT, because I don't want it. I know I am representing that, but it's diversity across the board. It really is. It's everybody from everywhere. Bigotry is just a really challenging reality that'll happen when we all get together and understand each other a little better. Differences are good.
And like you said, it's earlier, it's all about education and understanding each other.
Yeah. Sure.
How did you get involved in the meeting and events industry?
I think I started that story a little ways back. So, I run a marketing and advertising agency, and picked up an awful lot of local hotel clients. At that time, most hotels were responsible for their own marketing, weddings, their banquet space, their rooms. Now, of course, as time has moved on and computers have automated everything, the average general manager and marketing head in a whether it's franchised or it's corporate owned, all they have to do is go to a website and they can pull up templated ads and everything else. And so the need for a Philadelphia-based advertising agency that had maybe 25 or 30 different hotel clients, and put 15 ads in the Knot magazine on a regular basis, because they wanted that piece of the weddings business, but that was the start for us. We did all of that. And that led into producing the very first LGBT campaign for the city of Philadelphia, called Get Your History Straight and Your Nightlife Gay. And that was the first time that a city put $1 million into an LGBT campaign. We did a television spot and garnered $50,000 to $100,000 worth of public relation on Hollywood Squares. We were, and what we did was we took traditional images rooted in the history, because Philadelphia is the first city in the country, and it's all about history. It all started here, and so we had Betsy Ross, and we had an image of her from Getty Images, a painting of her sewing the American flag, and we just changed it into the gay flag. And so Betsy Ross was sewing that. So it was Come to Philadelphia where freedom started, and get your history straight and get your nightlife gay, because the research said that, people would go to a city to learn, but then at the end of the day, they wanted. So that led to the Navigator series, where I started to do other cities and started to do advertising. I brought LA out of the closet. I brought New Orleans out of the closet. So we had a lot of fun doing all of that. And then, of course, that gig led me back to the Brigada, which then said, hey, why don't you get involved in the meetings industry, which I knew nothing about. I'm still learning a lot, but it's been a fascinating 6-year run, and I've enjoyed all the people that I've met and all of the patients that I've had the pleasure of collaborating with. And as you know, we don't compete. So, what we're doing is we're weaving the LGBT community through all of these various conferences, and, that are based on profession or based on, a specific type of role. And, we're pulling it all together.
What do you feel the future holds for the industry and all these associations you mentioned?
I think my feeling is that the industry is continuing to grow, that it continues to desire to want to embrace diversity, inclusivity. I think it's very funny. You have differences of opinions. You can be in one panel discussion, and one association expert will say, well, I think that there's no diversity without inclusivity. And then you'll get the next one who'll say, No, we disagree that there's really no inclusivity without diversity. So, but the fact that that's a healthy banter going back and forth, I think is very promising. I think live events are going to continue to grow. EduCon's going to be 1,000. Last year, I think it was 500 or so. I don't want to get that number wrong. If Sheriff was to see this, I apologize if I don't have the math right. But I know that it's gotten much bigger. That they're closing off registration. They'll feel there'll be some abundance, which is a pleasant surprise for them. MPI is expecting, I think, over 700 or so in in a remote destination, Cancun. They're going to be down in Mexico. IMEX America just blew records. They were well over 10,000. And I know when I talked to Natasha, she said, if we do 7,500, 80,000, I think I'm going to be really happy. And then she said, Dave, you know what, the number's over 10,000. And I said, you're kidding. And we did almost 300 plus at our own networking event, which made it the single largest event. So, we're seeing growth, and then we're also seeing technology that's going to allow us to plug in for hybrid experiences. I mean, there's just a whole group of people that have said, this break that we had has given me the opportunity to re-examine. And I know we don't have to talk about that because there's so much discussion about the 4-day work week now. And, I see the cities getting busier, but I still run a marketing and advertising agency. And I was just in my client's office, which is a major insurance brokerage in Conshohocken. Employs about 140 people, and there was maybe 25 or 30 people in the office. So there's still challenges getting everybody back to work. Recent fact for Global Meetings Industry Day, one of the speakers said that 90% of the people that go to a live event go to network. They go to meet other people and connect. So our number one mission has been about connecting, educating, and then professional development. The connecting part we got down a long time ago. We started these networking events, and they are a reason why people attend conferences now. They come to our event and they look forward to it, and they tell us that when they leave, and they tell us that when they arrive, and they tell us that when they get their invitations, and they're like, wow, we were looking forward to that. We were wondering where the LGBT MPA networking event was going to be this year, because it's a little piece of, I get to go away. I get to meet all my friends. I get to immerse myself in like thinking, and like-mindedness. And that's the social aspect is really very, very, very important to augment the business aspect.
Did you ever envision your group becoming what it is today?
No.
Okay.
I had hopes. I thought, the U.S. Census says that there's about 11,000 self-identified LGBT community-based folks within the meetings and events industry. We have 2,400 of them as members. So clearly we've got a quarter. We don't have half yet. Do I think that that's a reality? We're going to Frankfurt. We're going to bring our roadshow to Europe. I think that we'll see an enormous lift in EU members. There's nothing over there. As I said, there's nothing globally. I think that there's certainly been more progress. There's less resistance. There's less backlash, on small levels, little mini battle. And I think that timing is good for the community to have a place where somebody's willing to organize events, and organize content education for them to not just participate in, but to sit and be a part of, getting that intelligence. Mm-hmm. So we're looking forward to not the plane ride, but the actual experience. And we'll have a network event, and if you're going to come, please let me know when you're invited to our networking event, which I think will be oversold in a heartbeat. I think we need to do in our first year, but I'm looking forward to this.
Anything else you want our listeners to learn about you and the organization that I haven't brought up?
No, but you want me to recommend somebody for your next podcast?
I do.
So when I started, it was a very lonely road. Nobody wanted another new association. A lot of people didn't think that the LGBT community needed anybody to help them get together, that we have a lot of rights, that to find each other, we could find each other, that gay bars were closing. So that would need a networking event, where that was really just kind of a pop-up gay bar in some concept. And that, we wouldn't see the appreciation, we wouldn't see the connectivity and the growth. So the first few years were tough. A lot of doors were closed. I put some of my own money into it to get it up and running. So there were times, and I had a gentleman that believed in me and believed in it, and was my first chair, and that's Jim Clapes. He is now the conference director at Mayor Brown in Washington, D.C. And you can reach him at Jim Clapes, CLAPES 01 at gmail.com. And he's articulate advocate. He just stepped down from early 5 years of working on my team and helping build positively a lot of the relationships and articulating really the need, destinations, businesses to support the community on so many different levels, on mission levels, on metric levels, on simple as good deed doers, to be able to step up and say, I'm proud and I'm out, and and identifying so many folks that were decision makers that have become members, because they were proud to be part of the community, and they just didn't know about us. Going back to the young lady that was sitting next to me at the table when I handed her my card, and I thought, I can't believe there's a person next to me that has never heard of us. Because after 6 years, I think everybody knows about us, but we'll see when we get to Europe. I have a feeling we'll get a lot of that. So that's our short-term future. We'll be at IMEX. We'll be at Convening Leaders again next year, where we rinse and repeat our entire cycle. And I hope that we're at Connect in Minneapolis in August. So for all of your listeners that want to be a part, it's LGBTMPA.com, and you can just go right to the join button. We love allies. We love anybody that's part of the meetings industry. You don't have to identify. It's an option. There's no fee to join. So it's there's no reason to not become a part. You get our weekly newsletter that keeps you informed, and and of course, then you get invited to all of our events. If you're at any of those conferences, you can step out the closet into a safe environment and have a good time.
Well, this has been great. Always a pleasure to chat with you. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you at our next event.
And thank you for having me.